Hi there, everybody. Time to talk a little bit about post-election politics. And to do so, we're going to be talking about the Reverend Billy Graham. You know, Billy always said he never had anything to do with politics. He was perfectly neutral. He's a perfect liar. He had everything to do with politics, and that's what we're going to talk about today, and particularly the rather sad ending to all his political wanderings. He was born in 1918. That's a long time ago, as a matter of fact. He'd now be, 95. Every year of it, he's more or less an electrified corpse just sitting there. Anyway, as a young man, he was famous in North Carolina for being the greatest Fuller Brushman salesman that they had ever had. Well, that tells you an awful lot, folks. Right there is the beginning of it all. He went to a Bible school when it was called Wheaton, sort of a jerkwater outfit. He was even then known as a lightweight, and even when he first started out with his crusades, his critics said of him that he was a fellow with a oatmeal for brains. Well, how did he get started? Well, it's a matter of timing, really. I don't think he planned it that way. He just fell out. It was the perfect time. He had what they call campus crusades for Christ, and they were tent shows. He'd have these revival meetings. They'd actually erect a tent, open up, people come in, and he particularly pitched them to what we would call, in our time they call them junior colleges, now they call them community college. And he'd get kids in there that were very enthusiastic, and he'd carry on this crusade for Christ. And his pitch was this. At this particular time, the country was in the Red Scare, and it had to do with the fact that the Soviet Union had taken over most of Eastern Europe, and there were some communists who had been exposed in our government and so forth, but there was a great scare that they were taking over everything. Well, as it happened, listening from afar was William Randolph Hearst, the master of San Simeon, the owner of dozens of papers, of magazines, radio stations, and the rest of it. And he sent out the word. He said, Puff Graham, Puff Graham. Also listening was a man by the name of Henry Luce, the editor of Time, Life, and Fortune, the owner of those magazines, and he too said, Puff Graham. Suddenly, Graham was a national figure, but he was to rise exponentially to a higher level. And it happened just this way. Reporters asked Billy, they said, Billy, what is heaven like? And Billy, theologians, might have been a little cautious about that, saying, well, we don't know, we'll have to get there to find out, and even if we did, we couldn't tell people about it. And so, not Billy. Billy knew what it was. He said, it's all gold. It's all gold. The streets are paved with gold. We ride around on Cadillac convertibles made of gold. And there's peace and there's harmony. And you'll join your families. And everything is wonderful. And there are no labor unions. Bang. Before this, Billy was playing golf at local courses, paying $5 a green fee. Now he wasn't paying anything, and he was taking golf with the likes of the president of General Motors, of General Foods, with President Eisenhower, and on and on. He had made it at long last. A word or two about his rallies. I don't want to get it too much into it, but they were a combination of shrewd psychology and just showmanship. Get the crowd, get them jazzed up and everything else with endless choruses of this, that. Then Billy appears and generally had sweating like a pig. He had to change his suit about 4 or 5 times a night with all his enthusiasm, to give you some idea. He was always a Republican, and he was a Republican operative. But he never endorsed anybody. But it was perfectly plain who he was endorsing. He was endorsing Republicans. His favorite candidate, of course, was President Nixon. He was behind Nixon 100% of the way. Thought Nixon was God's gift to man. And you know something? Billy paid an awful price. Because what Billie did not know was that every word in the White House, in the Oval Office, was being taped by Nixon. After his death, Nixon's death, the Nixon libraries slowly let out the tapes. And here was Billie giving Nixon a lecture on Jews in New York City, and just the most violent anti-Semitic rages you could possibly imagine. Nixon lapping it up, of course. But Billie had an explanation for it all. He says, "That wasn't me. Wasn't him. What's he talking about? My friends, what you are is what you, the things that you hope no one sees or knows about, what you do and what you say, that you do in private. That's what you really are." And that's what Billie was. He was exposed. It was an awful blow for him. I'd have to give him some credit here. Regarding civil rights, his ministry actually was pretty much integrated to the extent that it was possible in the last century. It was tough to do. He had blacks in his chorus, and he had black reverends, and he even made bail for Martin Luther King when King was in jail. He did all those things, but he never marched with Reverend King. And in fact, any time that King was about to undertake one of these important marches, Billie seemed to be on vacation or wandering away someplace else. Billie kind of just sort of faded through the years. He got old. We all do, you know. And he came to life suddenly in the Clinton years with the bombing of the Oklahoma federal building in Oklahoma City, where 187 or some people were killed and the building was reduced to atoms. He rushed out to heal Oklahoma City of this. A more modest man might have said something to himself like this: well, in view of the fact that this is Oklahoma City, maybe the local rabbis and ministers and priests ought to be the ones to do it. They know the family, they know the grief, they're able to do probably a better job than I can do, but not Billie. Fathead that he was, he had to go out there to help heal the nation. Thank God he wasn't well enough to heal the nation after 9/11. He missed that one, thank God. Anyway, one of his last forays into politics was to endorse Romney. Once again, by not naming him, but making it perfectly clear that he was backing Romney. And this involved him in the hypocrite that, of course, he always had been from the start, which is namely this: on his website, until this last year, any mention of Romney, Romney wasn't mentioned, but Mormonism was treated as a cult, as something just barely Christian, if that, but it was a cult. That was erased from the website just prior to the time that he endorsed Romney. Well, we're not through with Billie, even if he dies. As I say, he's sort of an electrified corpse, probably sitting in his own mess. I say that kindly. You know, when you get old, things happen. I don't know. I'm pushing 88, and things aren't getting better for me, but there is something about old age that's rather disgusting, frankly. And in his case, it's just appalling. And he just sits there and looks out. And he has his son, Franklin. He's going to take over the ministry and all that stuff. I'd like to end this thing with a kind of a footnote and a finale. And the footnote is simply this. I was too young by a little bit to be able to vote for Franklin Roosevelt in 1944. I wish I'd been able to cast a vote for him. But that didn't happen. I was too young. But not in 1948, because Truman was running that year, and I'm happy to say I voted for him. It was the proudest vote I ever cast for the presidency. And part of the reason for it is, you'll see when I tell you about Truman, Billy Graham managed to work his way into Truman's White House. He always had back doors to things. The man was just cunning at publicity and stuff. Truman disliked the man almost immediately. Long after Truman left the White House, he was interviewed by Merle Miller, a journalist. And I want to give you an exact quote. Harry Truman, President of the United States, what he had to say about Billy Graham. He says, But now we've got just this one evangelist, this Billy Graham. He's gone off the beam. He's, well, I hadn't ought to say this, but he's one of those counterfeits I was telling you about. He claims he's a friend of all presidents, but he was never a friend of mine when I was president. I just don't go for people like that. All he's interested in is getting his name in the papers. Amen. Join me next time, and let's have a little talk about the odious son of the odious father, Franklin Graham.